people who think they're untouchable.
Those folks should think again and cut it out. And if they don't, I promise we'll have enough handcuffs for all of them.
The U.S. government put this case together so fast that Trial A was long, but not as long as everyone expected, and the jury didn't waste time. It took just 5 hours to make its decision.
It sounds like this outcome wasn't a huge surprise.
Now, the prosecution had a very solid case here with a lot of documentary evidence, but the government also had 3 key witnesses. These were Sam Bankman-Fried's co-conspirators, a group of his deputies and close friends. It included his ex-girlfriend who ran Alameda Research, this trading firm. And one by one, these cooperating witnesses told the jury that Bankman-Fried directed them to commit crimes. You know, their testimony was so compelling that Bankman-Fried decided to throw a Hail Mary. He took the stand himself so that jurors could hear from him directly. It's fair to say that backfired. Bankman-Fried faced a withering cross-examination, lasted for almost 8 hours, and prosecutors used Bankman-Fried's own words against him. They poked holes in his story, made it clear to the jury that the scheme was his idea, and he knew that as cryptocurrency prices plummeted last year, and did they, that his company's implosion was unavoidable.
When's he getting sentenced?
Judge Liz Kaplan has scheduled a sentencing hearing that'll be on March the 28th. Now, Bankman-Fried is just 31 years old, and the maximum penalty he faces is 110 years in prison. His lawyer gave us a statement, said Bankman-Fried maintains his innocence and plans to, quote, continue to vigorously fight the charges against him, so he's going to appeal. But Bankman-Fried faces other legal challenges. The U.S. government has been planning to try Bankman-Fried on several other criminal counts. It's unclear if prosecutors are going to go ahead with that because this one turned out the way that it did. The judge wants to know that by February. On top of that, there are civil suits, and Bankman-Fried's parents are also fighting a lawsuit filed by FTX's debtors, trying to claw back billions of dollars that disappeared when Bankman-Fried's crypto empire collapsed.
NPR's David Gura. David, thanks.
Thank you.
Tomorrow on a Weekend Edition, Japan is having a post-pandemic tourism boom. In fact, the industry is so strong that the government there has had to announce measures to ease what it calls over-tourism. To hear the story, listen to NPR on your smartphone, smart speaker, or your reliable radio. This is NPR News.
Good morning. It's 8:43. This is 91.7 WVXU. Coming up on the Marketplace Morning Report, after just 4 hours of deliberation, a jury found Sam Bankman-Fried, the founder of the collapsed cryptocurrency exchange FTX, guilty on 7 charges of fraud and conspiracy. Prosecutors say he stole at least $10 billion from customers. Also, 4 months after the Supreme Court blocked President Biden's plan to forgive up to $20,000 in student debt for most people with federal loans, the administration has come out with a new, very different plan. All of that coming up on the Marketplace Morning Report. It starts in 10 minutes on 91.7 WVXU. On southbound 75 before Sharon, the wreck's been cleared, but traffic is still slow from Union Center Boulevard. In the Butler County area, State Route 4, that's Dixie Highway, southbound between Clinton Avenue and Bishop Avenue, the road's closed because of a wreck. And in the Dayton area, southbound 75 after Dixie Highway Central Avenue, there's a broken down vehicle. It's on the right shoulder.
Today's programming is made possible in part by a grant from the Uday and Nandita Chef Family Foundation, supporting projects to create a more compassionate and equitable world.
Hi, I'm Scott Horsley from NPR. You've probably heard me talking about inflation and how the price of used cars and trucks is way up. That also means the old car or truck you don't need anymore is worth more as a donation. So if you don't need that old vehicle, or if it's going to be too expensive to repair, why not donate it to this radio station? It's easy, free to you, and it'll have a big impact. Please, think about it.
To donate your car, go to WVXU.org under Ways to Give.
9 first warning weather, mostly sunny, milder today. It's going to warm up to 59. Partly cloudy to mostly cloudy tonight, a slight chance of rain, the low 41. And tomorrow, mostly cloudy, again, a slight chance of rain. An even bigger warm up tomorrow, all the way to 62. Still chilly right now, though, 35 in Cincinnati.
Support comes from the Give Them 10 movement and Scooter, the neutered cat, here to answer any question about cats. By calling Scooter's Help Center at 1-833-GIVE-10, a cat specialist can give you advice on spaying and neutering, adoption, fostering, cat behaviors, and more. That's 1-833-GIVE-10.
Good morning. This is 91.7 WVXU. I'm Mary Van Zalesnik. On Tuesday, Ohio voters will go to the polls to decide two very closely watched statewide ballot issues and decide scores of local races. In fact, because of Ohio's 30-day early voting period, Ohioans have been casting ballots for more than 3 weeks at their county early voting locations. The two issues topping the ballot for Ohioans are Issue 1, a constitutional amendment to enshrine abortion rights in the state constitution, and Issue 2, a legislative petition initiative to legalize the recreational use of marijuana, which would be taxed by the state. In Cincinnati, most of the attention is focused on Issue 22. It's a proposed $1.6 billion sale of the city-owned railroad to Norfolk Southern Railroad, with the profits going to infrastructure projects throughout the city. WVXU's senior political analyst, Howard Wilkinson, has been following the campaigns. Good morning, Howard.
Good morning.
Issue 1, the abortion rights amendment, is getting a lot of attention from national news media. What makes it so important to both sides?
Since the U.S. Supreme Court struck down Roe v. Wade in June of last year, there have been 6 states, Michigan, Kentucky, California, Montana, Kansas, and Vermont, that have voted in favor of abortion rights in statewide elections. And these are red states, blue states, it doesn't seem to matter. They've all supported abortion rights, and Ohio can be on the verge of becoming the 7th. That's why both sides in this, which is one of the most contentious issues in American politics in the last 50 years, are paying so much attention to Ohio. That translates to money, millions upon millions of dollars being raised here in Ohio and pouring in from out of state. 67 million since March, about 40 million on the pro-abortion rights side. Right to Life groups at the national, state, local levels are raising opposition money, along with the Catholic Church in Ohio. The Archdiocese of Cincinnati has already kicked in at $500,000. People ask me all the time how the church, with its tax-exempt status, can spend money on what amounts to a political campaign. And the answer is simple. Federal tax laws allow it to issue campaigns, but not for candidate campaigns.
Well, let's talk about Issue 2. What would that do if passed?
Much different than Issue 1. Issue 2 is a legislative petition initiative that, if it's approved by voters, the Ohio legislature could tinker with it before it goes into effect. It would set an amount that individuals could possess of marijuana, and a tax on the pot would go into state coffers and generate a very big revenue source for the state. It's been a really quiet campaign, unlike 2015, when a ballot measure proposed by a group that wanted to profit from the sale of marijuana spent $20 million and failed to convince Ohio voters.
Cincinnati Railway sale is really a complex issue. That's Issue 22. WVXU's Becca Costello has an extensive story on our website explaining it and answering 30 questions about it. Can you boil it down for us?
Well, if Issue 22 is approved, it would allow the independent board that oversees the 143-year-old railroad to sell it to Norfolk Southern for $1.6 billion. That money would be deposited in a trust overseen by the railroad board, which would disperse no less than $26.5 million a year to the city to fix or replace city streets, bridges, buildings, and other infrastructure needs. The 337-mile rail line runs from Cincinnati to Chattanooga, and Norfolk Southern has been leasing it for $25 million a year for a long time. Proponents of the issue say it will produce more than that for the city each year if the sale goes through.
Now, it's the subject of very intense ad campaigns. Tell us about that.
Yes, mainly from the pro-sale side, which has $4.25 million to spend on the campaign. You've seen all the TV ads. You've probably found a number of slick mail pieces in your mailbox at home if you live in the city. Every dime of that money has been contributed by Norfolk Southern. The opposition committee, on the other hand, has raised only $5,000, according to its pre-election campaign finance report. They're depending mostly on yard signs and social media to get the word out. in the end, Marion, issue 22 boils down to this. Voters either trust the city to do what it says with the proceeds, or they don't trust the city to make good on its promises.
Howard, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Howard Wilkinson is WVXU Senior Political Analyst. You can read all of our election coverage in our voter guide at WVXU.org and follow along on the website Tuesday night for real-time election results.
Support comes from Cincinnati State, with transfer pathways to all major universities in the region and academic credits accepted nationwide. A smart start to the first 2 years of your 4-year degree. You can get started with online courses and the support you need at cincinnatistate.edu/youcan. The preservation of journalism is critically important. Including WVXU in your estate plans ensures reliable news and information will always be available in the Cincinnati community for generations to come. Ask your tax advisor about including WVXU in your will or trust. More information is available at WVXU.org.
Good morning. It's 8:51, and coming up in about 10 minutes on the BBC NewsHour, the U.S. Secretary of State is back in the Middle East. The head of Hezbollah in Lebanon is also due to speak. Can this war be contained? Plus, former crypto king Bankman-Fried found guilty and could face a century in jail. It's all coming up on the BBC NewsHour. That starts at 9 o'clock on 91.7. Sunny, milder today, the high 59, partly cloudy to mostly cloudy tonight. A slight chance for rain, the low 41. It's 35 now.
Local support for our marketplace comes from Sharonville Convention Center, focused on creating exceptional event experiences. New for 2023 will be the Todd Portune Exhibit Hall with a capacity of up to 2,000 for dinner and 40,000 square feet of exhibit space. The Sharonville Convention Center is dedicated to making your events even better. More information at SharonvilleConventionCenter.com.
The Great American Jobs Machine shifted into a lower gear last month.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by Live Oak Bank, committed to helping business owners optimize their savings with a high-yield online business savings account and FDIC insurance. Great information is at liveoakbank.com/radio.
I'm David Brancaccio. Good morning to you. The big hiring and unemployment reports are just in September. 150,000 more people were on payrolls, but that is less than expected. And there's news the big number from the month before was partly an illusion, with a revision downward. Economist Julia Coronado of Macro Policy Perspectives is also president of the National Association for Business Economics, has just gone through today's government report. Hey, Julia.
Good morning.
So, I mean, not terrible. Some sectors of the economy are still hiring. Which, for example?
So in fact, most of the hiring was driven by state and local governments that are still staffing up post-pandemic, and healthcare, which has been a juggernaut of hiring in the last few months. Aside from that, the hiring was pretty anemic.
And you can't miss these revisions. What we thought was real strength was, strength, sort of.
Exactly. So the 100,000 downward revisions is a pretty chunky downward revision and essentially eliminates the upside surprise from August. These job numbers are still good, but they are cooling off and not quite as strong as prior numbers suggested.
So in all this bundle of data, you see a strand of certainty in all of this? Certainty?
I think this report tells us that the Federal Reserve is done raising interest rates. They have achieved their objective, a much cooler labor market. Still healthy. We're not rolling over the edge, but it is a lot cooler than it was at the start of the year.
Economist Julia Coronado is also a professor at the University of Texas, Austin. Thank you very much. A separate survey from the government today finds the unemployment rate, it's a household survey, up just slightly to 3.9%. I see the bond market. Bonds understandably are up, pushing the 10-year interest rate way down, 4.53%. Stocks, S&P futures are down 0.1%. Dow futures are up just 4 points. NASDAQ futures are down 0.3%. Apple stock is down 1.6% in pre-market trading after the firm forecasts sales this holiday quarter will be weaker. People, especially in China.
All right. Gonna go vote Going to the Butler County Board of Elections, like 5 minutes away or so. Got a couple of big issues on the ballot. One regarding, I think, a constitutional amendment on abortion, and two, the commercialization of marijuana. I was about to skip it because I'm going to be on a road trip by the time my absentee shows up in the mail. I was also worried if I don't vote, I don't know. If you don't vote, you can't complain, right? So your civic duty and then there's a couple of school board and city board elections, I guess. I don't know all the names on that one, or on either of those boards. I've met a couple of them. Probably just gonna vote them back in. Maybe I'll try to do a quick Google on the other people, other candidates, before I get in line to vote. I find it kind of clever. So on a previous ballot, issue 1 was, the message, if you're progressive, the issue was, or they were trying to tell everyone to vote no on issue 1. You got all these signs saying vote no, issue 1, about abortion. And on this ballot, it's issue 1 again, and it's regarding abortion. And now hopefully the progressives remember to, read it clearly and vote yes, the opposite way from the previous ballot. It's clever. And hopefully people are reading. So that's why I'm somewhat worried about this one. It can get kind of confusing. Okay, you tell me issue 1, vote no. Now this time you're telling me yes. Messaging's all screwed up. busy. I guess I don't know if it's busy. It could be crazy in there. I'll do a quick Google of all these different candidates on the school board, city board. Got it done.
7th, and even since the bombing began on October 7th. So that's their, the posters might be a little bit of a form of protest, and taking them down might be a form of protest, and it's really sort of taking off this back and forth, really kind of showing the divide that we've been talking about, that even these posters, even of hostages, has become so divisive in this country.
Arthur, the White House is now demanding an apology from conservative TV host Jesse Waters. During a segment about these posters that Anita's talking about on Fox News, Waters went into a rant against Arab Americans, which we're not going to play for you. What have Fox and Waters said about that rant and the demand for an apology?
I'm aware of the demand for apology. I don't know what Waters' response has been, except I suspect that he did not apologize. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
But he wasn't on the 5 yesterday. They said he had a pre-planned speech in California.
Yeah, I read a transcript of what he said, and it's like, listen up, Arab Americans, and then he talks about U.S. involvement in the Middle East and says, we've had it with you, and it's just obviously an incredibly inflammatory statement, and it's became the centerpiece of the White House's message this week, which was that they're promulgating a new national strategy to combat Islamophobia. And so they haven't created the strategy yet, but they announced that they're working on it, and I think it's clear that they want to move past their initial response to the Israel-Gaza war when they said that calls for a ceasefire were repugnant.
Alex mentioned this strategy to combat Islamophobia. Alex, tell us a bit more about what Arthur mentioned.
Well, and this is, to what Arthur's point is that the White House is sort of racing to catch up by being so closely aligned with Israel in complete solidarity early on. There's a feeling among Muslim leaders in the United States that the administration does not have any actual credibility on when they are announcing these Islamophobia steps. And that message was conveyed to the White House by Muslim leaders last week in a meeting that they had on Friday. Now, it was interesting, the White House did not advertise the meeting was taking place in the same way they advertised that a meeting with Jewish leaders the week before had taken place. The White House is really struggling to sort of, get its hands around this. This is why you saw them roll out this announcement of an anti-Islamophobia strategy that is coming at some point. But I think the fact of the matter is that, the big picture here is, despite what the White House is going to say, the thing that is driving the Islamophobia and anti-Semitism is the war. And as it continues to potentially escalate with the involvement of Hezbollah, Houthi rebels, potentially Iran, as it continues to escalate, that I'm not sure what any sort of initiative will have, what effect it actually will have.
Well, Anita, that's a really good point that Alex brings up. I want to ask you, how are American Muslims responding to this new quote-unquote strategy to combat Islamophobia? I saw a poll this week that Arab American support for President Biden had dropped by double digits. And so I wonder to what extent bridges have been burned with Arab Americans because they're not, they're seeing the administration as shoulder to shoulder with Israel, and I don't know how sincere do they think this strategy is.
Man, this is a wide
Yeah,
road.
I mean, I would just point out that it's actually not a strategy yet. It's sort of a working group that's bringing together lawmakers, advocacy groups, community leaders, with the administration to come up with something. So, some people might argue, well, they're already behind, right? There's been some frustration that about the rhetoric that's come out the last month, but now here they are trying to put together something now to come up with a strategy. So I think you're exactly right, and Alex is right, that there's so much frustration. There feels a lot of people feeling like, look, we've seen what's been happening the last month. We haven't seen what we want to, we haven't heard what we want to hear. We haven't seen what we want to see. And now here they're trying to do this, maybe not at the last minute, we're a month in, but they don't even actually have a plan. I think there was some reporting by the Associated Press that actually they were going to unveil the working group earlier and had to postpone it a few days just to get a handle on some of this frustration that's out there. So they are really feeling this at the White House and trying to figure out, sort of what the next step is.
We have a couple of messages from listeners. Rose writes, I think tensions are high because there's literally a genocide going on against the Palestinians for decades, and when people don't recognize that, people become angry. Charlie wrote to us regarding college students, it's because the kids have been indoctrinated to believe that Israel is an oppressor. A reminder, we're speaking with Anita Kumar from Politico, Alex Thompson from Axios and Arthos, and Arthur Delaney from HuffPost. Let's move on to the latest news out of former President Donald Trump's fraud trial in New York. The case brought by Attorney General Letitia James claims that Trump and his children knowingly inflated their family company's assets. In a post on social media attacking the judge and the New York Attorney General, Donald Trump wrote in part, quote, the banks and insurance companies were paid in full, no defaults. They all made money. There is no victim except me. Leave my children alone. Engoron, you're a disgrace to the legal profession, end quote. Engoron is the judge in the former president's fraud trial. Alex, last week, Judge Engoron fined Donald Trump $10,000 for violating a gag order for a second time. How could these latest comments outside of the court affect his case?
The judge, it has been fascinating to watch because the judge clearly has no patience with Trump and some of these rhetorical games. Now Trump, one of those comments that prompted the fine, Trump said the judge and the person next to him have it out for me. And then when the judge brought him to the stand, Trump said, oh, I wasn't talking about your law clerk. I was talking about Michael Cohen, even though the law clerk is the one sitting right next to him. And then the judge was like, I don't believe you. And it was like, I'm fining you away. And that was the first time you saw Trump on the stand. Now, Trump is expected to come on the stand again next week. But it has been also very interesting to me that Trump has insisted on attending the trial. He, very much throughout. This is about the civil case, so it's about his business empire. But he has not had to be there many of the days that he's attended. There could be political upside to he has clearly positioned himself as a martyr of the judicial system, and it has rebounded to his political benefit in the GOP primary. But it's interesting that he is going and attending the trial rather than going out to Iowa.
Yeah, it's the Trump witch hunt. He's got to be there for the witch trial.
Exactly.
And briefly
on 91.7 WVXU. Support for NPR comes from this station and from Yarl and Pamela Mohn, focusing on civil liberties, foster youth, public radio, and the arts. From Heather Sturt-Haga and Paul G. Haga, supporting African Wildlife Foundation, working to ensure the future of Africa's wildlife and wildlands. Learn more at awf.org. And from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, helping NPR advance journalistic excellence in the digital age.
I'm Indira Lakshmana from the Associated Press. This is 1A. Before we get back to the news roundup, we remember Matthew Perry, who died this week in LA.
You know how people say that Tulsa is the Paris of Oklahoma?
What? Who says that?
People who've never been to Paris?
While many fans will remember Perry for his role as Chandler Bing on the sitcom Friends, his body of work was extensive. He had roles on primetime shows such as Ally McBeal, The West Wing, and Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip. He also worked in films, including Fools Rush In and The Whole Nine Yards. Perry's 2022 memoir, Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing, discussed his decades-long struggle with substance abuse and his recovery efforts, which resonated with many. Readers celebrated and appreciated the honesty of his memoir.
It's really exciting that people will read this story, and it'll hopefully help a lot of people.
Yeah, what's the biggest thing you hope people get out of it?
That they learn that the disease doesn't care where it goes.
What can I get you for lunch?
Hi, I made an order through the app.
What's the code on it?
EM71.
You can go ahead and pull around when you have a chance.
Alright, thanks. Hello.
You had the mobile order?
Yeah.
Just go ahead.
Thanks. Thank you.
I'll be back.
Alright. Man, that took longer than usual. The curbside pickup on the app wasn't working.
Jr. and Eric testify, and they this week, and they really pushed back on, sort of saying they didn't really know anything, even though they're the ones that have been running the company. I think she's going to say, look, I got out of the business. She was involved, but then she went to the White House with her dad. She's going to say, look, I shouldn't even be here, and I think she's already made that argument. We have we don't know what else she's going to say. I think Donald Trump is going to go over there and say what he always says. He's going to play to the cameras afterwards, like he has done when he's appeared in court. He's going to use this as a partly political campaign. He's not in Iowa. He's not somewhere else campaigning. He's going to show up there and use that moment for himself to try to get some attention, to say again it's a witch hunt, to get some media attention after it's over. You know, I think out of all the family members, Ivanka Trump, as you mentioned, is probably the one we don't really know what she's going to do and what she's going to say. She's played a different role in the business and with her father at the White House than the others, and it's going to be very, very interesting to watch.
I want to ask each of you briefly before we leave, what are you watching next week? What's in your reporter's notebook, and what's the story you want to highlight?
I'll be on Capitol Hill to find out what's going to happen with the new speaker and funding the government, or letting the government shut down this month.
What about you, Alex?
The Republican debate, the third one, is going to be next week, and Trump is also counter-programming with a rally. I would expect you're going to see DeSantis and Nikki Haley duke it out as people try to sort of climb over each other in order to place themselves as the main alternative in Donald Trump.
Quick last word, Anita.
Yes, definitely the debate. You know, Nikki Haley has been rising in the polls, and her debate performance in the first two debates was perceived as pretty good. So I'll be seeing how she comes in the third one.
Anita Kumar from Politico, Alex Thompson from Axios, and Arthur Delaney from HuffPost. Thank you so much. Mike Kidd is 1A's sound designer and engineer, and Barb Angiano produces our podcast. This program comes to you from WAMU, part of American University in Washington, distributed by NPR. I'm Indira Lakshmanan from the AP. Jen is back on Monday. Have a great weekend. This is 1A.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Workday, committed to helping organizations adapt to change, using real-time data to uncover insights, stay decision-ready, and prepare for whatever's next. The finance, HR, and planning system for a changing world. And from the Cy Sims Foundation, since 1985, supporting advances in science, education, and the arts towards a fairer, more just, and civil society. More information is available at SciSimsFoundation.org.
How well or how badly is the media covering Israel's war against Hamas? News organizations have deployed their best correspondents and producers to the region, but verifying fact from fiction is getting harder. And with journalists barred from entering Gaza, how do you tell the whole story? Next time on 1A, we've got the latest on the ground and examine the challenges newsrooms face covering the war.
Good morning. This is 91.7 WVXU. Just a quick reminder, turn your clock back 1 hour before bed on Saturday night.
Support comes from family-owned Henderson Music, providing pianos for the Tri-State for over 60 years. Offering Japan's Kawai Grands, uprights, and digital pianos, as well as rebuilt and refurbished Steinway, Yamaha, and Baldwin pianos. You can visit their website at hendersonmusic.com to view their inventory and make an appointment to come and see Henderson's selection.
Support comes from Rock Island Realty, a locally owned remodeling company. Whether it's a porch, deck, bathroom, kitchen, addition, or a whole home remodel, Rock Island Realty specializes in adding modern amenities while preserving your home's original character. More at rockislandrealty.com, bringing great people and great homes together.
91.7 WVXU Cincinnati and 88.5 WMUB Oxford. News from Cincinnati Public Radio and NPR.
One of the biggest concerns about the fight between Israel and Hamas is the risk of a wider regional war. What are we now hearing from another militant group? From WAMU and NPR in Washington, this is 1A. I'm Indira Lakshmanan of the Associated Press. As Israel's invasion of Gaza widens, in neighboring Lebanon, Hezbollah militants seem ready to escalate their own fight. The group's leader has now broken his silence. We hear what he's had to say. We catch up on Russia's war against Ukraine. Elon Musk tells the UK's Prime Minister why AI could put him and the rest of us out of a job. And we hear why the Panama Canal might interfere with your holiday shopping plans. That's all ahead. The Friday News Roundup starts after these news headlines.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is meeting with top Israeli officials in Tel Aviv today as the country ramps up its military offensive in Gaza. Blinken once again reaffirmed U.S. support for Israel and underscored its right to defend itself against attacks from Hamas.
There cannot and must not be a return to the pre-October 7th status quo. That's unacceptable. It's not tolerable for Israel. It shouldn't be acceptable or tolerable by anyone else. And that means that the idea of Hamas remaining responsible for governance, such as it was, posing an ongoing and enduring threat to Israel and its citizens, is unacceptable.
Blinken also said more needs to be done to protect Palestinians stuck in Gaza, adding that the U.S. continues to press Israel to minimize civilian casualties. The Israeli military has encircled Gaza City, separating its main urban center from the rest of the territory. NPR's Greg Myrie reports from Tel Aviv.
With its overwhelming firepower, Israel's infantry and armored vehicles have surrounded Gaza City. Hamas is fighting back, and Israel's military says it's waging face-to-face battles. Israel launched the ground operation a week ago in response to the Hamas attack on October 7. It's increasingly clear Israel will focus its troops on northern Gaza in general and Gaza City in particular. Israel has repeatedly told Palestinian civilians to go to the southern part of the territory. Israel's military says more than 20 of its soldiers have been killed over the past week. Hamas has not announced casualty figures. Greg Myrie, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
Cornell University has canceled classes today after a student on campus was charged with making a series of violent anti-Semitic threats. NPR's Amy Held reports a number of universities in the United States have become fraught with tension amid the war in Israel.
I'm not Jewish, but I'm appalled and horrified at what I'm hearing.
Education Secretary Miguel Cardona visited Towson University outside Baltimore, where area students reported feeling isolated and threatened online and on campus because they are Jewish.
And I want to tell you directly, we've got your back, and we're not going to allow for that to happen.
Cardona says he's issuing a directive to schools with language around standing against anti-Semitism. The Anti-Defamation League says since the October 7th Hamas attacks on Israel that sparked the war, the U.S. has seen a near 400% spike in incidents targeting Jewish people compared to the year.
Philadelphia Eagles seems to have this play down to a science. So far, converting more than 80% of the time for a first down this season.
They're back in DS territory. Verbally shoved that is. Everybody's in there. And it's a first down.
This Philly evolution.
Georgian composer Sultan Singsadze's 5 miniatures come from a set of Jewish folk songs, and here on 90.9 they were just performed by violinist Lita Batiashvili with the Georgian Chamber Orchestra. Another traffic report for you. I-275 westbound is blocked between Kinnaird Avenue and US 52 and the Ohio-Kentucky state line due to a wreck. I also have a broken down semi-truck blocking the right center lane of I-71 Avenue, as well as debris reported in the right lane of I-71 northbound at Montgomery Road, US 22 and Ohio 3. This report is made possible by Compassion International.
WGUC goes wherever you do. Listen to 90.9 online and iHeartRadio.com and on mobile device through the iHeartRadio app.
The start of November marks the start of Native American Heritage Month. And here on WGUC, here's Native American flutist R. Carlos Nakai and pianist James DeMars performing DeMars' own work, Even Songs.
Professional relationship with the late writer and director Nora Ephron. She says Ephron and the best love stories reflect the realities of the time they take place in, so it feels natural that What Happens Later features a former couple trapped in an airport together. Ryan adapted the story from a play during the COVID lockdowns.
I was wondering, you're locked down with one person. If you had that opportunity, would you work out some of the things you hadn't worked out in the past with the next, or would you let that opportunity go? And so anyway, all those questions were swirling around when I first got the play.
I mean, there is dialogue that I really feel like could have almost been pulled from real life conversations, like about him not connecting with his Gen Z boss, about rock music getting worse, about whether everything in society is getting worse. How much of this was drawn from real life conversations that you were having during that period?
Well, once we, had the idea that he was a catastrophic thinker and she was a magical one.
You are.
This is the Indicator from Planet Money. I'm Waylon Wong.
And I'm Paddy Hirsch. Today is Jobs Friday, and the news from the Bureau of Labour Statistics is not bad. The US economy created 150,000 jobs last month, which isn't too shabby, and I think definitely merits a toot on the old horn.
That number is not as good as some people were hoping for, though. The forecast was for around 170 to 180,000 jobs. And the unemployment rate is ticking up a bit. The BLS says it's now up to 3.9%. That's the highest since January of 2020.
The job market, though, is still pretty tight. There are still lots of open jobs out there, and companies are still creating jobs. And there appear to be more open positions than there are workers to fill them. In this kind of market, the balance of power between workers and employers is usually tilted in the workers' favour.
We say usually because something unusual is happening in the labor market right now. Yes, there's lots of jobs open, which means workers can be picky, but employers are being picky too. They're advertising jobs, but in a lot of cases, they don't seem to be in a big hurry to fill them.
So on today's show, we'll look at this unusual wrinkle in the labour market and what it means for workers and employers and for the economy as a whole. That's coming up after the break. If I say the word tight to describe something, it might conjure the impression of something being squeezed. And when it comes to the labour market being tight, the people usually being squeezed are employers.
We're seeing a lot of that in the economy right now. As we've seen over the last year or so, employers are paying more and seen them agreeing to union demands and industrial action.
And some employers are struggling with this squeeze. Recruiters for the US military, for example, are on record saying this is the most challenging recruiting environment the Department of Defense has probably ever faced.
The intense competition for talent right through the economy might be bad news for companies or organizations that are strapped for cash and trying to manage their spending. But it continues to be great news for people who are looking for jobs right now.
I think there's a lot of opportunities out there.
This is Betsy Stevenson. She's Professor of Economics, Public Policy at the University of Michigan.
Lots of people will be struggling to find workers, but when it's in a labor market that's not just tight, but one with a lot of openings and opportunities and new businesses getting started, then people can be even more picky about what kind of work they want to do.
And there are lots of opportunities out there. The U.S. is creating record numbers of new businesses, and that's beyond the startup surge that we saw in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic.
The increase in opportunities that are out there really comes from two things. It comes from this new surge in business dynamism with a huge increase in the new business formation, and the fact that there are businesses that have really tried to reconfigure how they do things.
The pandemic ushered in a kind of workplace revolution that has encouraged workers to agitate for better workplace conditions and flexibility. And employers, by and large, have responded.
In this new landscape where there's a glut of jobs and an awareness that working conditions can change, job seekers can afford to be picky, which is kind of refreshing. It's nice to hear that the balance of power has tipped a little in employees' favor for a change.
Well, not so fast. It turns out that it's not just potential workers that are being picky right now. Employers are being picky too.
Betsy says a lot of employers right now are advertising jobs, a lot of jobs. But weirdly, they don't seem to be in a particular hurry to hire.
Not every job opening is getting filled. And we're not seeing employers care enough about filling those openings that wages are skyrocketing. So that must mean that there's a lot of potential employers that are willing to hire if they find the right person and aren't going to hire if they don't find the right person.
In other words, what we have right now is a labour market in which both workers and employers are being super picky, which is super unusual and just kind of super, really.
It's a great economy. It's great. Lots of opportunities, only take one that really works for you. That's the life everybody should want to live.
This unusual balance between labor and employers has an important side effect. It means that while pay is rising in many jobs, we're not seeing huge, widespread wage increases.
If you had an economy where only employees were being picky, what you'd see is a big surge in wages, right? Every employer would be like, I want this person, well, I'll pay a little bit more. But that's not happening.
And this is just as well, Betsy says, because that would play into one of the biggest issues the world is facing right now, inflation.
People have been very responsive. They see all these new openings out there. They're not saying, I'm only going to come back into the workforce if you pay me really high wages, which might spike some kind of wage price inflation spiral. They seem to be coming back if they find a job they want to take, which is not quite the same thing as, if you throw more money on the table, then maybe you'll be able to lure me out of my house to take a job.
The jobs boom we're seeing now is due to an enterprise boom in which millions of new companies have been created over the last few years.
Yeah, you want a little data dump on this?
I do.
All right, so between 2020 and 2023, there were 4.9 million applications filed each year to create new companies. That's up 89%.
Yeah, did you file your application for, what was that idea you had, outfits for guinea pigs?
I could file several applications for all the ideas that I have. But here's the thing, not all of those companies were actually created and became employers. But a significant number did. By one estimate, we created 1.2 million new employers in that period.
Betsy says that the conditions that enabled that enterprise boom were unprecedented. She means COVID-19, of course, and the massive stimulus that was pumped into the economy.
All of that cash, well, it helped people spend, but I think it did more than help people spend. I think it reduced the risk that they faced. And they didn't have to worry about being evicted. They didn't have to worry about making that student loan payment. And when we take some of the risk away in other places, it looks like people are more willing to take on other risks, like starting a new business.
Now, the government isn't likely to turn on the cash spigot again like that anytime soon, so it's anyone's guess how long these optimal labour market conditions are going to last. And the other thing Betsy says is that not everyone is feeling the benefits of all of this.
Because it hasn't been one economy for everybody. The people who've taken advantage of the new opportunities that are out there have moved largely to better things. The people who've stayed put, a lot of them have seen their job perhaps evolve in a way that's not quite as good as it was before.
That's why, even though the data coming out of the BLS and other monitors indicates that the labor market is in pretty good shape, not everyone feels that way.
There's a lot of change underway in the U.S. labor market. And there's definitely a group of people, perhaps a large group of people, for whom a lot of change leads to feelings of anxiety and worry. And, they're not quite sure that things are going to turn out as well as they were before.
And it's small wonder that people are so anxious about their prospects. Automation, AI, global trade. The forces of change are moving faster than they ever have. And Betsy says the only way to survive in an economy like this is to be flexible and to take the opportunities when they come.
This episode was produced by Corey Bridges with engineering by Sina Lafredo. It was fact-checked by Sarah Juarez and edited by Kate Kincannon. The Indicator is a production of NPR.
Hey, it's Peter Sagal from NPR's Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. I'm one of thousands of NPR network voices coming to you from over 200 local newsrooms across the country. We bring all Americans closer together through free and independent journalism, music, politics, culture, and so much more. The NPR network, what you hear changes everything. Learn more at npr.org/network.
Hi, this is David in San Francisco. I'm currently at the airport, anxiously awaiting the arrival of my brand new puppy. This podcast was recorded at
10:52 a.m. Central Time on Friday, November 3rd, 2023.
Things may have changed by the time you hear this, but I'll still be caring for my little furry potato. Okay, here's the show.
Congrats! Oh, congrats. A cute little thing. Hey there, it's the NPR Politics Podcast. I'm Ashley Lopez. I cover voting.
I'm Deirdre Walsh. I cover Congress.
And I'm Domenico Montanaro, senior political editor and correspondent.
And today we're going to take a look at the new Speaker of the House, Louisiana Republican Mike Johnson, and the challenges he's facing. Deirdre, he seemingly has the support of his fellow members after a very fraught election, but one of the things a speaker has to be able to do is help raise money, right, for candidates up and down the ballot. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's not necessarily a thing Johnson's had to do before.
Not at all. I mean, and he has big shoes to fill. The former Speaker Kevin McCarthy raised all together with all the various super PACs and political operations $500 million, $500 million in the 2022 campaign cycle. Even House Republicans who support Johnson say those are huge shoes he's going to have to fill. He's going to need a lot of help from people like McCarthy, from people like the head of the House Republican Campaign Committee, Richard Hudson. So far, he's done pretty well. In the few days after he was elected, he raised $1 million from grassroots supporters. But that's a long way from the sort of big donor corporate relationships that McCarthy developed over many years in House Republican leadership.
That's a lot of pressure, not to mention the added pressure that is a potential government shutdown. Now, just 2 weeks away, I mean, what's the strategy of trying to avoid that? Especially that issues related to government spending and bipartisanship helped bring down Kevin McCarthy.
Right. I think Republicans don't want to go there again. I mean, after the 3-week drama of not having a speaker, not being able to function as a House, there will be some grace period for Mike Johnson, and there will be some kind of stopgap bill. Right now, Johnson's talking about something that could take government funding through potentially sometime in January. But the details are really still really up in the air. And there's a lot of pressure on him to step into this role and negotiate with people like the Senate Majority Leader and the President when he doesn't really have relationships with any of these people.
Domenico, Republicans and Democrats have to figure out a way to work together on these things.